right, welcome back to another episode of the Consistency Podcast. I'm your host, Andre Robinson, and I'm joined with FLW. Um, we have a interesting topic this week. I'll let Frank introduce it. We have have a video to just start off the conversation, and we'll just kind of go from there.
So many of us remember the hip hop group Houdini, and there was a line in their song that went, "With friends like that, who needs enemies?" You remember now? When I asked you if you remember Houdini, not that you remember them when they were doing their thing, but I'm sure as a rap aficionado, you know who Houdini is, right, Dre?
hmm Yeah, it was like I know them because of Tupac, some relation to Tupac. I can't. He was a part of them, or he came up with them.
Yeah, now I learned it's funny you mentioned Tupac. I didn't even know that a piece of Tupac's upbringing was in my home city borough, the Boogie Down. So all these years I
Oh,
didn't
really?
know that he eventually he moved out to Cali, but that's not where he started out.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so what what prompted this question or the topic around friendship is many of us are aware of the horrible passing of Nolan Wells. And there's a lot of speculation around why and how he passed. I really don't I really don't know enough to speak competently about that. But what I've heard is that allegedly he had these four best friends that participated in this boating outing, this trip out to the waters. And Kane famously asked, "Am I my brother's keeper?"
Mm.
The question that I have is, how is it that Nolan ends up gone and so many of these people who were supposed to be his best friends seem not to have a clue? So that's the thing that is troubling for me. And that's what prompted the discussion that we're going to have tonight. Now, I'm going to lead in with a couple other things, and then I'm going to let you chime in, Dre.
Mm.
First of all, my question to our audience, and I'm really happy, Dre, that you said that there were some people who responded to our previous shows, and we like that. We want your feedback because the whole point of this is to generate dialogue. We want people to we have these conversations around the kitchen table. We don't care, have a conversation, make it the subject of one of your frat meetings. The bottom line is just about every topic we deal with, we believe for the most part, is something that, or a piece of it, even when we're just having fun, a piece of it can be used to uplift because ultimately that's the reason why we do this. So with my middle sister T Blessed, who we had on our show
Shout out T
sometime
Blessed.
last year,
Mm-hmm.
she when she was in elementary school, one day after school had let out, this woman comes up to her and says, "Hey, your mom told me to pick you up today." And by the grace of Yahweh, my sister had the sense of mind to get away from her
Mm-hmm.
because there was an understanding that if mom wanted somebody else to pick me up, then she would have she would have let me know something, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And if she didn't have that sense of mind and my mother hadn't enculturated certain things in her, you 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 might have never met T Bless. Even today, I was in one of these huge apartment complexes, and it happened to be right after school. You know, one of those complexes where it's so huge you have to drive 2 miles to get to the back of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was one of those, and it was after school. And this little girl, she must have been maybe maybe 4, and I didn't see a parent anywhere around. Now, suffice it to say, when I was in kindergarten, I walked myself to school. And and that was, that's what I wanted to do. My mom would watch me out the window walk, and she would watch me come back. But that was a different time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, today we live in a time where there's child trafficking and all that kind of stuff. And so if my sister had a thought that this person was my mother's friend, the question is, why wouldn't my sister have been introduced to this friend before this friend just suddenly pop up to take her off somewhere?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to have real conversations with our children in the kind of climate that we're in now. One more thing, and then because I can go on and on. But there was a cannibal named Jeffrey Dahmer. I don't know if you heard about him, Dre.
Mm-hmm.
This guy, he was a real life cannibal. I'm not talking about some make believe Jason or something like that. This guy ate people,
Mm-hmm.
and he particularly his favorite thing to eat was black children, and he would lure children over to his crib, and that's what it was for him. He would lure them over there with candy and all kinds of treats, and so we have to know what's going on with our children. We have to know who our children's friends are, and yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna stop there. There's a whole set of other layers to this conversation that we're gonna have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good time to probably play the video he sent. So it's just a story of Kenny Smith talking about it. Well, honestly, we'll watch it first before I say think about it. So, oops, hold on. Can you? Are you hearing that doubled?
I didn't. I didn't hear a double.
Okay, hold on. I'm gonna mute. I'm gonna mute my mic just to make sure it doesn't double on the computer. So just remind me if you can't hear me talk. Then just remind me that I muted myself.
Okay.
Okay. And as he was talking about that, that actually, I had seen a TikTok of different levels of friendships. I was like, oh, that, and so it was kind of splitting it up into like strangers, people who like acquaintances, close acquaintances. Like it was just so. As he was talking about that, like his relationship to Shaq at that time, I was just that's what I was thinking of. So I started seeing if I could find that TikTok, but it might be a little bit too much to try to find right now. But yeah, interesting stories. Though. I mean, it could have, like you were saying about T Bless, that could have been a situation with her. But yeah, that to me, I'm listening to that story. I don't even hear, I don't hear too much funny about it because I would be. I would have I would have. I mean, I'm sure years later you can laugh about something like that, but yeah, I'm assuming that since his wife or his ex-wife had Shaq's number, um, they got some sort of consent, but that I would still have a very big issue with that if I was Kenny with the school, because that's ridiculous. I don't know how you can let a 6-year-old just say I want to go with somebody and let them go. So,
And I'm pretty sure that whoever let Kenny's son go, obviously, we know, we know what they're sharing on this video here right now. And I don't know if this was an elite school. I don't know all the details behind that.
mm-hmm.
I imagine that whoever made the release is thinking that maybe to the point that you're making, that the mother of Kenny's son might have already had association with the mother of Shaq's daughter,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe they knew this, and for that reason, they made the release. But in our society, there's a lot of celebrity worship that goes on, and when Shaq left in LSU, he was already a known product, a known commodity all around the country. So they might have figured that, well, of course it's okay, because they both are NBA ballers. So, Shaq isn't going to do anything, but that wasn't their call to make. As somebody that worked in a school and was a classroom teacher and all of that, that was out of order, But again, like Kenny said, that was the '90s, and it was just, and Shaq being young at that time, I'm sure that in his immaturity at that point in his life, he may not have realized that that wasn't cool, unless, like I said earlier, he had an understanding based upon the relationship that the two moms had. Because sometimes that happens in families. I can tell
Yeah.
you, unfortunately, sometimes the dad is the last to find out.
Yeah.
You know, X, Y, and Z has been going on for months, and we forgot to tell you, and just neglected to tell dad. You know, so there's a lot of different dynamics.
That's the issue I kind of have with it, because it's like, if I'm getting to the school and then finding out, and that's where I would have a problem at. Like, it's fine if you gonna pick them up, but the fact that I was able to get to the school and then have to find out instead of someone telling me before I went to the school, so that just shows how out of the loop he was at the time. So but it didn't sound like they had an arrangement. The way he was describing it, they had some sort of proximity, but I don't know. I remember when I was a kid, I lived right across the street from my elementary school, so I would walk home. But if I ever wanted to go to one of my friends' houses directly out of school, I had to bring in like a whole form prior to at the beginning of the day
Right.
to let people know. Like, it wasn't something just, oh yeah, you could. Even though, like, I walked myself home, and the people from the school could watch me walk into my front door. That's how close my elementary school was to me. So, but even then, it's just like they were very serious about having that. And as a kid, I was just standard procedure for me. But now as an adult, I can see why you have to have this written off. Like, the parent has to legally say, I'm giving you the okay to let my child run away, or go somewhere else with this person. So I'm happy for those precautions, and that whatever school it was, like, because I am imagining that this would be a prestigious school even in the 90s. So yeah, for that to happen like that is still kind of it's kind of wild to me. But I guess everything was cool, so that's why I'm assuming there was some type of different understanding, because I don't even think I'd be cool after we had like, how did you get away with my son? That seems
Right,
crazy.
right. And like I think we both are agreeing, the onus is on the school, because the school is the one who released the boy. You know, the school had to release the boy to Shaq. Um, I kind of wish that we could have shared the video that you were talking about, but even if we can't find the video, you bringing that up kind of leads me into the next point I wanted to make, and that is that I wonder if some of the folks that we have we have put in the friend category should really be put in a different category.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we should back up and put a definition on friend. So for you, Dre, when you use the word friend, what does that mean to you? If you say this is my friend, that means what?
I would say that's over the years it's changed a lot. Over the years it has definitely changed a lot. Like, what it used to take before, like when I was a kid, if you ever came to my house, or I ever went to your house, I considered you like a friend. That was kind of how I mentally separated. Like, okay, these my friends who was like, we're cool at school, and these are like my friends who's like, yeah, we going over to each other's houses. Um, and I think for a while, like, I kind of kept that mentality, just like, okay, in what proximity do I have to this person? Um, then I started getting on, teams, so football teams, teammates, inner workings of them, like a lot of them. And then there's people who now, with your teammates, you're spending time with them every day. So it's like, now you throw the term brother comes in at different times. So some people, now you like, okay, so now I got friends, and then I got brothers, and then I got best friends. So throughout the years, then you're starting to rank people based off of that, because then it's like, okay, these are people I'm spending time with all the time. So it was really a time thing when I was growing up. Just if you were going to ask me that, like, okay, who do I consider a friend? I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm with this person every day, so this is, my friend. Um, but the thing is, that then there was also people who I wouldn't spend as much time with, who I would still genuinely call friends. But um, there was that. Okay, not to ramble, but there was also another TikTok that I saw that said, the human brain can have about, or they were studying like chimpanzees or monkeys, and just kind of understanding how many people you could kind of keep in your mind as considering a friend. And it was like, you can know, there's a limit to the amount of people who you can like know at a specific time. And they said that number was like around 150 people. And it's like, people have to move in and out of these different ranges for you to operate and kind of keep that sense of self for you. um I do wish I had some of those TikToks pulled up, because those would have been great. But today, who do I consider friends? Like, I have a lot of people. I feel like one thing I don't have any friend groups. So I think at one point I used to have a lot of friend groups, and everyone in those friend groups would be considered. I would just consider my friend. Um, so now I would kind of limit it more to the people who, maybe the main people who I would have like stayed connected to in that friend group, who I would consider my friends, like people who we reach out to back and forth, talk about ideas. But in terms of like, I think that's a harder question for me to answer now, because I don't get to see too many of people anymore. So it's like, I don't consider really the people who I work with friends, or people who I'm on just teams meetings with friends. So you know, but there's definitely a lot of people. So I don't have a true definition of what I would call a friend, because it depends on how long I've known somebody, or how long I've gone without seeing somebody. Because I'm at the age now where like I haven't seen some people in 20 years, and I don't know all of the decisions that they've been making for the past 20 years. So it's like, the person who I knew at one point, who was a very close friend, now I don't exactly know, what you've been through, and, some things that you may be struggling with. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're not a friend, but it's just like, okay, can we start off just like, oh, we was best friends at one point. Can we start like going out over here doing this? Like, I think that's where I'm at now, in terms of understanding where to create boundaries with that friend word. So, yeah, I'd have to give it a little bit more thought into what the characteristics of a friend would be, especially then when you start talking about business and just what you try to do with your friends and stuff. So yeah, that's my scattered answer, I guess. So, what would you consider a friend?
So as I was sitting here, I have my Cubs, one of which, thanks to you, was also on this show. Joshua was one of them. They would tell you that I have various definitions, and I just created a definition. So I would like to look at friends on two levels. Some people describe it as the outer court,
Mm-hmm.
and then the inner court. The inner court is going to be those people who you allow to get close to you, and the outer court are people who may they may come to the house, but they're never going to get into the bedroom, or they're never going to get into those sacred spaces. You know what I'm saying? So Here's going to be my definition of friends. Friends are the people who I can trust to operate in my best interest, even when I don't have all the answers. Because let me give you an example. So I know that there's some knowledge in the tech space that you have
Mm-hmm.
because you're in that space. So if I'm considering you a friend, then even if you're telling me to move in a particular way that doesn't make sense to me, if you're my friend, then I'm going to trust you to be telling me something that's in my best interest,
Right.
even if I don't fully understand.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, in times past, I've been bitten in the because there have been people, well, I won't say people, a person or two who who sat at my table and portrayed themselves not just as a friend, but they would even suggest that they were more than that, a brother. And oh my goodness. And this particular person I'm thinking of was a wolf.
Mm-hmm.
This was somebody that had some information, was given trust based upon the information they had, but had, I don't think, ever had any intentions to operate in my best interest. It was all about them, their interests, period. But then, so these are people in the outer court. The inner court people, my simple definition for them would be these are people who I would trust to behave as I would as it pertains to the people that I care about most in my absence.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a particular way that I would move. So these people have to know me
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because when I'm not there, I expect them to move as I would move in my absence.
I like
So
that. I like that definition because actually, I think that struck a point with one of my previous friendships as to why it hurt so bad because it's like you treated someone who I care about in a way that I wouldn't treat them, and so I like that definition of that.
out of fact, and somebody that's in my inner court, I'm pretty sure he doesn't mind me sharing this. When a friend of his passed away, and this is what makes this story so amazing. When this friend of his passed away, they weren't on the best of terms,
Mm-hmm.
but they were still inner court friends. When he passed, the guy who I know was also a close friend of mine said that that guy, one of that guy's offspring, one of his daughters called him and said, "Hey, we're calling you because our father said that's what we're supposed to do." Now, his father, her father, had not actually had this conversation with our mutual friend
Mm-hmm.
who relaying this story. But clearly, he was in that man's inner court because, and if he didn't understand it, he found out that day when his daughter called.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wonder if people, obviously people are going to choose the definitions that they choose, but if we work from those definitions, there are folks who have given the title of friends to people who have never or very seldom operated in their best interest. They operated in their own self-interest, but not in the self-interest of the people who are listening to us. So I think if nothing else, one of the things that I hope will come out of this conversation is that we will all take inventory of who those people who we have put in the friend category, let alone who is in that inner core. For an example, a guy bestowed a wonderful honor to me. So I get this text last night, and it real cryptic text, which these kind of texts often are. Mm-hmm. The cryptic text, it was, going on 11. Text simply said, "Mom passed on Sunday." So now you get a text like that, like, damn, what's next? Mm-hmm. So for me, what was next was not to text him back. Mm-hmm. What was next for me was to call him,
right?
Have a conversation with him, because whatever state of mind that he was when he sent me that cryptic text 2 or 3 days later was where he was. Mm-hmm. But the response was not, my bad, or, or something like that, yeah. And so if you send somebody a text like that and their response is, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that," and that's it, and that's all you hear from them, then maybe you misjudged where they were. Maybe you thought this person was your friend. Mm-hmm. You feel me? Or me, and for people like myself that had been nuptial for a long time, you reach out to somebody that's a friend and say, "Hey, me and so and so, we broke up." That's big news. That's not like, "Yo, I'm sorry." That a simple response like that is not enough. Mm-hmm. I don't think. Not from a friend, from an associate maybe, but not from a friend.
Well, I would say, I think at this time now, that may, in some, like, I personally don't feel like it's enough of a response, but for some people, a text back, because somebody can now send you that message, but they can be sending that out to a lot of people at one time. So it's like you can get that and then call them immediately and then not get an answer. So a lot of times when I guess it more depends on, like, I think in the way that you described it, if somebody just gives you when it's very cryptic, that's when it's like, okay, I'll definitely call in that situation. If somebody was like, "Hey, I'm just letting you know my mom passed," or because I get those messages every now and again, so I kind of gauge if this is like not necessarily a mass text, but this is like the first round of updating people who weren't necessarily immediately family. And so if I feel like it's at that time, then it's like, okay, that might not be the best time to call, because they may be in around their family. So, and I think it's really a determining factor is how long it took for them to tell you. And I'm just saying in today's, so sometimes a text, like, I wouldn't, if they call you, then that's a different level. So, and then if they send you an update text, that's another level. And then some people just end up getting the funeral information. So there's different levels to it. I can't necessarily say that if somebody texts you that information, that if you don't call immediately, that doesn't mean that you're their friend. Sometimes you do just text back to just see their temperature, like, see, like, well, is everything okay? And if they're, depending on their response to that would be, so yeah, somebody sends me that message, I might not call immediately, depending on who it is though. So like I said, depending on who it is, how much time has passed. So I might send a I try to text back immediately though for something of that magnitude. It also depends on how often I speak to that person. So it's like if I speak to this person every 3 months, or this the only time I hear from them during the year. So then I might be like, I might call them and be like, oh, it's not what's going, just because they might, now that means that this might have been the reason I haven't heard from them for a while. So there's a lot of factors I think that go into that in the way people respond. So yeah, I don't
Yeah.
want it to be like,
Yeah, no,
you know,
I totally get it. And I do believe that we have to be sensitive about the timing. I think that even when we're led to respond, all I'm saying is that the response should be appropriate for the relationship.
right.
So if a person is seeking to be sensitive about the timing and everything, when the person does respond, then it should reflect the relationship. And the person that sent the text might be viewing the relationship in one way, and the person receiving it, their response might suggest that hey, you got it all wrong. I'm not who you thought I was. Let me give you another example. And so often we hear these different stories to share. A lot of people in our audience know recent Football Hall of famer Sterling Sharpe. His brother Shannon has a very popular podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and on his brother's podcast, Sterling shared that when he suffered the career-ending injury while playing for his team, he said that, and that's what was funny about you talking about having these levels of friendships, and then some people kind of splitting off and getting and it maybe in some sense of a higher definition of being called a brother. Sterling said that he heard from almost no one on his team. That we're talking about a Hall of Fame football player. So we're not talking about somebody who was not a factor. We're not talking about a bench rider. We're
Mm-hmm.
talking about somebody that put up some mean stats, who meant a lot to winning for that team. He heard from hardly no one on that team, people he went to war with. And even though he didn't spend a lot of time talking about that per se, you can tell that that struck him, because some of these people he had gone to war with, in a proverbial sense. Some of these people he probably considered friends. And he said as much, he thought once he had this career ending injury, he would hear, and I'm sure there were specific people that he thought he would hear from. Now, when he did hear from them was when the announcement was made that he was going to be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't I don't fully know what to make of that, because on the one hand, a person could say, well, some of the people who didn't reach out, maybe they didn't even understand they were supposed to reach out. I don't know. I never played sports on that level.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that he shared it means, and based upon how he framed it, he was expecting to hear from some people like, "Hey, you good?" Because we're rooting for you, man, or whatever. So
I mean, with football teams, that's the thing. So there is subgroups in football as well. Like, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily like, linebackers hang out with each other, quarterbacks and wide receivers hang out with each other. So it's kind of cliques like that in a sense. So, but I mean, there's still a way that you can be disconnected from all of your team, seeing them every day to the point where it's not necessarily personal. Like, football teams have hundreds of people on them. I don't even know how a professional practice goes, but I know um, it's not as team building as it is in like high school football, college football. So they're all professionals, they're all grown men. They're pretty much handling their workout routine and nutrition. But when you're in high school, you're lifting together, you're going to school together, so you're together 24 almost 20 all day together for a whole week, extended hours. You're going in early, staying late, so you're really with these people an extended amount of time. But I think once you're in the professional life, if you don't make that extra effort to be around your teammates, then they look at you like a coworker. So I think in that sense, like, I wouldn't expect anyone from any of my previous jobs to reach out to me if something happened to me. I mean, if even when I was there, I mean, not so much that they didn't care. It's just like, if we didn't have that out of work relationship, what are they gonna tell me in my worst moment? Like, knowing that I can't, if I got injured and I couldn't code anymore or something, like, what are they gonna? Oh, hope you learn to code again. But realistically, they know. So it's just like, yeah, I feel sorry for you. So I mean, that puts people who don't really know you in a weird position, because it's like they may say something that offends you more than helps you out. But a lot of people do just want they don't even know what they want from other people. Like, he probably wouldn't have even known what to expect from other people, but I think the realization that nobody actually did reach out is the part that hurt him. But I don't think I mean, it could have been making him more anxious if they were reaching out, or if he was getting poured into at that time and people were like, we hope you're back, because I don't know the nature of his injury or the type of injury that he had, so I couldn't really say like if he tore an ACL or whatever and people knew it was over, or if there was still a chance of him coming back. So that's what I'll say to that.
yeah, well, the whole thing, and it's funny that you shared personally what your expectation would have been from your former colleagues. People have different takes on whether they are even interested in being friends with colleagues. Uh, I don't know. I would think, though, that the way that you hear athletes talk about the guys that they play with, that is different from a typical job. And they often refer, at least the winning teams, are always talking about, we're brothers and all that stuff. So, and Sterling was in a winning situation. But I do know that there are a lot of people who, like, I remember having a colleague. She was not for hanging out with her coworkers. Her thing was, we work together and that's it. We don't play together. And that was just her thing. Now, on the other hand, you have situations where people develop friendships with supervisors or feel like they are friends with their boss and their supervisor. And even today, more and more, we even hear people say that they're friends with their parents. So let's
That's
start with that last one. What's your take on that? I'm sure that you've heard that, and I've heard people even respond to the idea that they're friends with their parent or they're friends with their offspring. What's your thoughts on
I think I've always my parents are older for me, so I never kind of had that type of relationship with my parents. I love my parents to death, but yeah, it's not. I wouldn't. I don't look at them as friends. And that I see where that becomes issues. Like even as my peers get older and they have children and their kids look at I wouldn't say necessary. Like I don't think it should be the goal to be friends. But I do know people who say, "Oh yeah, I want to be friends with my kids." So some people that's their desire. I personally don't see that as where I don't see that as I don't want to say appropriate because I don't think it's inappropriate in the way that they're thinking. But I think when it comes to um, the betterment of that child, to have that type of authority is a much better dynamic to have as opposed to seeing yourselves as equal. Um, and not to say it's well, yeah, I wouldn't say it should be equal as a parent and a child, but it's certain things that people get comfortable with around their friends or and what they would consider parents, and then that throws off how they kind of interact with the rest of society and other figures of authority. So I say if you're always thinking that your parent is your friend, then that means that you're looking at your teacher as a potential friend, and those that's where it's like you have to have that hierarchy and that kind of trust in elders and authority just to know that you're not really on the same level. So yeah, I don't think that's not how I personally would want to address it. I wouldn't want to be friends with my children.
it? I think that it takes a whole lot of maturity for two people who, by the nature of their relationship, should be in different positions as far as authority. Clearly, if the person is the parent, as far as heaven downward, then the parent is the authority figure in that relationship. Now, oftentimes when you hear, at least in the healthiest of situations, often you hear people referring to their parent as a friend. Often it's among adults, an
Yeah.
adult offspring saying, because if we're talking about a 56-year-old woman saying that she's friends with her mom, this is, in many cases, a woman with grandchildren herself.
Yeah, of course.
But even with that, I think that it takes a lot of maturity in that relationship for people to then be able to shift back and respect the difference in their role. Because one of the things, even between me and my siblings, and T Bus talks about it all the time, even though we as siblings, we consider ourselves to be friends, they also respect the fact that I'm their elder brother.
Hmm.
And so, and I think we do pretty good with that, you know.
But not.
But we live in this we live in a society now, and it's funny that you mentioned the authority piece because we live in a society now more than ever where there's a there's a disdain for authority. Where
Hmm.
and I think that there's a there's a purpose for authority because authority is attached to boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
For some people, they don't want any guardrails, they don't want any boundaries until things go off the rail. Then, they're calling the police and all the authority figures.
I think because as we're talking about this, I really think that if I were to refer to my parents as my friends, that would be a more of a demotion in terms of relationship. So I think that's the reason I don't look at them as friends. Even my sister, like I'll spend a lot of time with my sister, but I wouldn't consider her a friend. My brother, we I can talk to him like a friend, but I wouldn't consider him a friend. And he's, me and him are old enough or as far as enough separated in age to where he could be my father. So, and that's why it's like I can see where people whose parents are a lot younger could then be and have that type of relationship, because I'm like, yeah, I'm talking to my brother. We, have the same, lived similar things. So, we have things to talk about. And so I could see if he was my actual father, we would be, having conversations from similar perspectives on certain things, or, just of a younger mind. But I think, like I said, since my parents are older, that it gave me that separation and understanding that, okay, these people, I always understood when I was around older people and then I was around younger people. Like I always said when I was young, I never really knew anybody in their 20s, honestly. Like my brother wasn't always, like by the time I was born, he was out of the house. So I wasn't necessarily around him. So I didn't know I never saw anyone in their 20s until I was in my teens, so um, I think that's part of the reason why I have the view that I have when it comes to being friends with parents. But yeah, I definitely think that would, any type of family, cousins, like if I were just to refer to them as friends, I think that wouldn't feel right. So I think that that's why I don't think you can be friends with your parents. I think you have to respect that relationship a lot more than that. So that's what I was saying.
That's interesting. I wonder how many people amongst the generation that you're a part of would see it that way. I think your view might be pretty unique on
Yeah, I
that
think so.
particular subject.
I think so. But that's why I'm just like, because as I'm thinking through it, I'm just like, because I hear that all the time. They're like, yeah, me and my mom is best friends and stuff, and it's like I could see myself being friends with my mom if we were, growing up together, but I wouldn't refer to her as my best friend. And there's also just, I mean, I feel like I go to my parents about, there's nothing that I wouldn't go to my parents to discuss about, and most of the time they're the only people who I go to talk to or ask for advice in a lot of situations. Um, but yeah, it's not necessary. I wouldn't describe it as a friendship.
So, Dre, a man named Charlie Tremendous Jones said many years ago that he could predict who a person would be in 5 years if he only knew who that person's friends were. So, what are your thoughts about that? How much influence does a person's friends have on who they are and who they are becoming?
I think it has a tremendous influence on who they are, because that's really how you're getting into most of your activities at that point. Like, and so that's what I'm saying. When you stop hanging around people as much, like, because I think that's been a very big shift for me. It's like I used to be around people all the time, especially back in college. People would come over to my house, and I had roommates, and so we just always have people around. And when I got my own place, it's just not, you don't have people running in and out all the time, or we meeting up over here to go over there. So like I couldn't even dictate who I spend the most time with out of my friends, because it'll just be like, oh, okay, I see this person over this weekend, and next weekend I'm going to hang out with this person. So it's all very scattered. So, but in that sense, like I said at the beginning, I don't have necessarily a friend group, but if I did have a friend group, that would be determining the places I'm going on the weekends, the extracurricular activities I'm doing, shows I'm watching, things that I'm laughing at. So I feel like that's where all of that starts to dictate how your days look, and then ultimately how your weeks look, how your years look, and kind of based off of those friendships. Because then you're like, okay, are we going to, going on trips together, doing, getting in relationships? Like, I think a lot of my friends in New York, a lot of them are now getting married. Almost all of my like core friend groups from New York has gotten married, but they're all living around each other still. And so once one got married and isn't able to go out as much anymore, the other ones is like, okay, well, time for me to settle down. Time for me to, but they were still all in the same community, the same friends. So I watched that happen much more smoothly up there, as opposed to different friend groups that I've had down here. So I think that's
So
a positive way friends can influence you.
that's a very good example you shared. Do you think, had you been in New York, do you think it is more probable that you would have joined them in matrimony had you been up there?
It's hard. That one's hard. It's hard to say because I was so young when I moved away from there. So
Okay.
it would have to determine on how those relationships lasted throughout, high school, college, and if I remained in that geographical area. Because I mean, everyone was pretty much, they didn't move far away from where we had grown up, as opposed to like I did. So I don't know how living in New York would have changed, my life at this point. So I can't say, but if I was still in that same friend group and we were going, because I never really, like, leaving so young, I never really had a chance to, grow up and go out with them and, interact with them consistently growing up. Like, I would go back later on as I was an adult and, hang out with them, but it was never like a consistent thing to know, like, okay, this is like my routine. I'm used to meeting up with them on Fridays, Tuesdays we go play baseball over here, something like. So if you have those type of routines with a friend group, and then certain people start getting married, and then going on double dates and stuff, then that's what starts to change the dynamics of a friend group. And I think probably by not having a friend group is a reason why I haven't been, into, or I haven't been, I guess, pushed into the marriage life, or, settling down one person. Because it's like, yeah, if you have a friend group, it's like you're not trying to bring around multiple people into a friend group. So it's like if you introduce someone to your friend group, then it's like it should be serious in most cases. And, from there, then they're like, okay, they get comfortable with the people who you're around, and, things like that. So and that's kind of the way that I've seen it from a distance with my friends in New York. So they've been their weddings have been coming back to back. They got one at the end of this year. So this was one of the it was a little last minute finding out about it, but I'm gonna still try to go because it's like one of the last like core friends from that group who's getting married. So I'm gonna try to get over there for that.
That's pretty cool. What I will say is that when a person is seeking to be a part of certain elite organizations, that organization will investigate to see who a person's friends are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, as we've said in previous shows, that's why it's so important that people remain mindful of what they share and project on their social media. Because for some people, they've been locked out of certain opportunities because of people who may have been assumed to be friends or even called friends in videos and so on and so forth. I mean, when with certain kinds of elite organizations, they want to know who those friends are because the idea is that if this is your boy and your boy is doing this, then you're probably doing that.
But that's also why when you haven't spent time with somebody in a long time, and then it's trying to re-engage in your life without you really knowing, it's like you almost got to do background checks on people. It's like
Yeah,
you just
yeah.
disappeared, and it's and that may feel strange, or but we really don't know what some people get into in the years that you're not around them. Like you know somebody, you could be with somebody every day in high school. You didn't see them in college. You ain't see them through their first job. They might have gotten laid off. They might have gotten a whole bunch of money. Like anything could have happened in between that time. If you're not constantly checking up on people, you have to you can't let how you felt about somebody 20 years ago just allow that to just be okay, well, we back on just like like we never left. As much as you would want to, and you may have those feelings in your heart like, oh yeah, we was together all the time, so but you don't know what they've been in, and that can end you up in a situation. So you really never know, and it's best to play it safe these days.
And what you said is so important. Some people, I can tell you, some people will get offended if they feel like you're being a little hands off with them, especially if, going back to those terms that I used earlier, if they were someone that they saw themselves in that inner core. Now, for a lot of people, things shift a bit when people go away to college. For an example, I was having this conversation with one of my clients recently, and this person is now a college student, and she was on our way back to school. And I was saying to her, I remember that when I was a college student, how a lot of the friendships that became important to me shifted because college is a different animal. You you living, you're not just going to classes with people, but you're living with these people
Mm-hmm.
because you're not living with your parents in most cases for those people who go away to college and stay on campus and all that kind of stuff. And so you might have been running with Buster, you know, all the years leading up to college.
Mm-hmm.
But then now, 8 years later, you're not really sure what Buster's been up to, especially if Buster was kind of in and out of the streets. So that piece of advice is very important. In fact, there's some people who got hemmed up because they never let go of certain people who, you know, weren't willing to deal with the streets. For an example, a young man that I know right now, he expresses that he really wants to stop smoking.
Mm-hmm.
And he shared that his pops told him that he's gonna have to lay it down to those people who he hang with that, hey, don't offer me this is not who I am anymore. And you have to be firm with it because, some people will still try to take you there because they remember how, you know, the group acted up under the influence. So
Yeah.
now you're trying to break everything up by no longer being under the influence, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Now, one of the things I can say to kind of bring it back towards the Nolan Wells situation, I knew as my as my offspring was growing up through elementary school, middle school, high school, I believe I knew a number of their core friends. Now, with the way the world is now and technology, it's hard to know everything. But as a parent, I think it's important to have a good idea and take the time to know who those core friends are. Because going back to the Charlie Tremendous Jones statement, those people, especially, and I remember you talking about this in another one of these podcasts, when a person is in adolescence, probably all the way up until 30, their friends are really, really important. And so if you choose wrong, you could you can end up anywhere, you know. I mean, literally end up anywhere. But
Yeah.
then in relationships, and I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on this. Of course, as someone that's been married and been engaged and all those things, and had my different experiences with romantic relationships. When we talk about knowing friends, how important it is for you to know the friends of the person that you're in relationship with romantically. Is that important?
Yeah, that's extremely important, really, because that's the people who you kind of have to trust when you know you're not around your significant other. So it's just like you want to know. I mean, somebody's friends could be the reason why we don't get to get together. Because if I don't like the decisions your friends make, or you guys are always going to a place that I don't like, or, then that might be enough grounds for me to be like, yeah, no, I'm cool on it. So yeah, friends is very important because you also need to know, are you going to be, they might have a bad set of friends. So it's like if you're not able to pick good friends, then that also makes me question you a little bit sometimes. But I mean, but it's a lot. It's just one factor into it. So they can be because some people never actually learned how to make friends either. So some people end up with the people who they were stuck in proximity to, and they started to believe that those were their friends. And
Wow. No, 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 no. You got to elaborate on that. That's good. That was good. You said some people, and that's to me. We kind of talked a little bit about this in previous episodes, but I think that that's very prominent today because of social media. And as I've said before, you might have a person that has 10 trillion uh,
followers, yeah,
followers or friends on IG,
yeah.
and then when you meet them in person, they're just disassociated and and unsociable as you can ever get.
I
So yeah, talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking more of there's so many people who don't have like they don't really learn a lot of the social cues to develop friendships in that way. Like and that's something I didn't even understand was like an issue until I got to like college and like seeing different people interact and you know, think, I compare a lot of different stages of life in terms of like how things would look at school. So it's like, okay, yeah, you got popular kids here, people who are in the sports, the pretty girl, like, so there's all different hierarchies. And sometimes if you just get put into a category, or if you get stereotyped into a category, sometimes you just find people who are also in that category and then assume that they're your friends, but it's really other people put you into that category, and you might not even like these people who, but you're just kind of forced to hang around them with the way that society kind of goes. So that's what I'm saying. These people might not be your actual friends, but they were the people who were always at the same events as you, and they were always, watching the same type of shows. So that those are things that can make you friends, but that alone doesn't make somebody your friend.
Good stuff, Ray. That's good. That's good. And you sort of answered the question I was going to ask you, because some people might be thinking, where is it? How do you? Now, I will say there are books. There are books that deal with this topic, and today we weren't after going at it from that angle. We were more interested in just having a conversation around it. But if you're a person that has struggled in this area, there are books and there are podcasts that deal with this subject. But in 2026, if if that's an area of weakness, it doesn't have to remain so, because there's resources that we all can access to help us. And I say we all because I think when it comes to relationships and friendships, it's progressive. Like you were saying earlier, your view on friendship has changed as you change. And likewise, there are people who I considered friends 2 years ago who are just associates today. There are people who I was considering as a potential friend yesterday, and now they're in the out group.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of this is dynamic. All of this is dynamic. You have some people. Even one of my teachers likes to say that he doesn't believe that it's all about running people down. You have those people who um, they profess themselves to be friends, but they're never really willing to do their part to make it happen. You got to you've got to be the one to always call them, or you've got to be the one to always text them, or you got to be the one to always visit them. And there's very little reciprocity. Now, for some people, depending upon where they are in life, that's okay. But then for others of us, that's not okay. And so again, we we all have to approach the topic based upon where we are now. A friend of mine was saying that she's working on a project, and she asked someone that she considered a friend to check out the project. And the check was something that literally would take 5 to 10 minutes max.
Mm-hmm.
The person told her that she don't get down like that. In other words, she wasn't that technologically savvy, so she'd do anything else for her, but she wasn't going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't even willing to try. But then turned around and asked her to do something that would take 3 hours to do. And so we, I, a lot of us have encountered those kind of friends who they've always got a big picture for you to pour into, and then you got a little thimble that you asking them to pour into, and they're like, nah, I ain't got nothing for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to decide based upon where you are at this junction in your life whether that's okay. Now, I can tell you, unfortunately, there have been times where that was fine for me. As crazy as that sounds,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not fine for me today.
Yeah.
So
That's,
there's one other thing I wanted to say too about friends and the whole romantic relationship thing.
mm-hmm.
A lot of times, whoever that person's friend is, especially if those two friends talk all the time, that friend can sometimes have more influence over your partner than you.
Right.
And if that person is speaking French and you're speaking Spanish to your partner, and you're thinking like, what the heck? When we spoke about this last night, you were good. But then the next day, she, she then went and spoke to her friend, and now your Spanish has become French.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's absolutely important. So for some people, who are thinking about jumping the broom, you better know all that person's significant people, because if first of all, you and that person should more or less be on the same wavelength. But for some people, they get messed up because that person and the romantic interest, they're on the same wavelength, and you think, okay, well, as long as we on the same wavelength, that's all that matters. No, that's not how that works,
Yeah.
because you got all these other influences, and if you find out that those influences are super strong and they're the opposite, they have a totally different opposite philosophy to yours, before long, that opposite philosophy is going to be a problem.
Definitely. You
Yeah.
gotta keep that in mind because, I mean, what the I forgot who you said had the study about or who can tell you where you're gonna be by your friend group. So I
All the
think that
tremendous
yeah,
jokes.
that's
Yeah.
where it that's one of the things that you will definitely need to pay attention to before making a decision like that. Definitely have to know who they're spending most of their time around. But like I said, you can't. The people who they spend their time around might also be different than who their actual friends are. So, that like I said, they could be spending time with people due to proximity, but they know that their real friend is in 3 states over who they talk to, maybe once a month. But that's where they're getting real their real information from. So, those are the
That's
people.
true.
Those are the people who you need to be more aware of in terms of friendships. The people who they hang out with on a daily basis is still important, and you have to definitely judge that too. But yeah, definitely understand who they're keeping in contact with um, as a solid friend. Like you need to know their inner circle, not their outer circle.
And it's important because, again, going back to this whole Nolan Wells thing, and there have been so many different cases in the media. I don't know if you heard about the lady um, who she went hiking with this guy. I don't know how long they had been seeing each other, and he might have thought it was a joke, but it went viral. It didn't sound like a joke to me. They're out on a hike, and he says, "Oh," and it's captured on video. I guess she was videotaping them,
Mm-hmm.
and he says, "Oh, this is where I was going to unalive you." First of all, I would never think to say that to somebody, and then second of all, unfortunately, people have been unalive taking hikes with random people that they met, just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And again, for some people who are super needy and thinking that just because of a particular person's paint job, if you hook up with them, you're going to come up. You know, you, you better get more information before you go off in the woods with somebody. You know, they done fed you some fantasies, and then the next thing you know, we can't, we can't, we can't find you.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many of these stories. I'm sure you've heard them. They proliferate, and a lot of it is based upon people not understanding how to develop a friendship. So you meet somebody 2 days ago online, and now you in another country in South America in the woods with them. The process, something's off with the process there.
I mean, people. That's one thing. People trust, or people's willingness to trust shifts. I think a lot of times with social media. So you see someone's social media and you think that you've known them for years, or you might have been following them on social media for years and think that you know them. So then you might only spend like a couple of days with them and feel like, oh well, this person's safe. And I don't really agree with that. But I'm also not super online like that. So you know, it's
I think people would be surprised at that, considering that you're the proprietor of We the Source, but then I think you told me you don't even have a TikTok, do you? One of those that I thought you would
yeah.
have, one of them you either don't have or you're not on it.
I just made a Instagram this year. So this year was my first year having a personal Instagram. So I had like a business Instagram that I was still, because it was getting to a point where it was almost feeling rude to like people be like, oh you have an Instagram and not have, or be like, oh well here's my business one. So that's why I started just having a personal one. But yeah, it took me a very long time to get a personal Instagram. I don't have a personal TikTok. I just use the We the Sauce TikTok. But yeah, I mean the social media, Twitter was like the real only one that I was on for a good while. But yeah, my account had got hacked, so I haven't been able to get in that since probably the top of the year. So that's actually one of the reasons I made it Instagram, because I just like, well, I guess I gotta start a new social media. So yeah, I'm not heavy into the social media. I see the benefits of it. I also see the downsides of it. But I wouldn't say I've grown up in the social media world per se to kind of understand. Like I would be out in Atlanta and be around people who were like Instagram famous, and I had no clue, because it's just like, oh, I'm just out here. Oh, I didn't know you had 100,000 followers. I didn't know you had 500,000 followers. So in my mind, it was never a big deal. And then, but now that I'm on Instagram, I'm like, oh wow. So, because if you're with this person, then that means that you're on, you are in front of 100,000 people's eyes now, or if their post gets a million things, and you're in, that. So that's something I'm a little bit more cognizant of, but I try not to make it affect anything really.
Well, the last thing I'll say is that I really hope that the conversation we had around friendship will cause us all to be thoughtful about understanding who those people are who are our friends. If you're a parent, doing your best to understand who those people are that are influencing your children,
Mm-hmm.
who are those people that your children are calling friends, and then if you're nuptial or looking to be nuptial, or even in a significant relationship, it's a good idea to know who those people are, who your partner considers friends, or at least get an understanding of what kind of things are important to that person. Because, like you said, that that best friend might be in another state, so you don't have a way to really be in touch with them, but you can understand who that person is by the things that your partner tells you about them, and how that person seems to influence the person that you care about. So it's important, and we all have to choose wisely, because at the end of the day, who we trust is really all we've got.
Indeed. Yeah, I think that's a good place to put a bow in it. Want to reiterate RIP to Nolan Wells. I know that his birthday had just passed, so happy heavenly birthday to him. Um, yeah, the situation is. It's been hard for me to follow. I lost one of my friends in high school. He drowned in Lake Lanier, so RP Tay. Um, in a similar, similar. I wouldn't say similar circumstance. I don't want to. It's just when people drown, or they go somewhere with people and then the other people come back and that person doesn't come back. So um, you have that. I've also there's too many situations to really count, but there's this unfortunately happens pretty, well, I won't say pretty often, but it's not uncommon to where situations like this happen. So
Yeah,
be
because
mindful.
tidal waves can be violent, So yeah,
So yeah, everyone be mindful. So tell your friends that the friends who you do care about, tell them that you love them. Reach out to them, even if we always say it's never a bad time to reach out to an old friend. Uh, just say hey, check on them real quick. Don't have to be long. Could take 2 seconds. Just let them know you're thinking about them. Um, and yeah, well, we hope you enjoyed this conversation. I love this one. I think this is a really good one. I would love to cut some of these up. I've always said, I keep saying I'm gonna edit sometime, but I just haven't had the time to get to that. But there was a lot of good moments in here that need to be extracted from the long form content at some point. So, but I think it's all evergreen. So we'll can do that soon, and just cut it up, put it out later. So please remember to like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.
God bless.